Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creators of Color Live. I'm really excited to host this conversation today. What's up? How's everyone feeling? Day number 2. Awesome. So I'm really excited to host this conversation. This topic is really, really dear to me, and it's actually one of the things that we speak about at a day-to-day at Revolt, since our mission is to continue to empower, develop, and put money back into the pockets of creators of color. And with that being said, I want to introduce our amazing panelists. First up stage, Christina Norman. Next up, we have Chanelle Smith-Walker. Sheldon Lewis. And last but not least, Jerron Irby. So now we're all here. I want to kick it off to you guys to introduce yourselves, your titles, and a little bit about the amazing work that you do.
All right, I'll be first. Hey everybody, thanks for being here. I think they should be giving out the drinks right now so we can have a last rocking panel, but we'll do our best to keep everybody engaged. My name is Christina Norman. I'm the head of content for the National Basketball Players Association. I also oversee brand partnerships. Our team is here in the front row and they rock. What I do is help players tell stories. So we've never really had a content division at the PA before, but if there's 450 players, there's 1 million stories, and there are tons of people who want to connect with them. So I focus mostly on long-form storytelling. We just had a film, our first feature film, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. This year, it's an amazing documentary called Game Change Game that we're still shopping to a distribution partner. My background is not in sports. I worked in media and entertainment for most of my life. I was at VH1, I was at MTV, I was at the Oprah Winfrey Network, and I'm really excited to bring all of that experience to the NBPA, and excited for this discussion.
Hey y'all, I'm Chanelle Smith-Walker. I'm the team photographer for the Carolina Panthers. This is actually my first job, is just doing photo. I was a college athlete, played volleyball, and fun fact, I've only worked in sports, specifically football, but I hate sports. I honestly do not watch football. A lot of the time I really don't know what's going on, wholeheartedly. Twitter became my best friend. Once I graduated, I became the creative director at Southern Miss, and then creative director for football at Baylor, then at NC State, and then University of Tennessee football. And so there I became the first Black creative director in the SEC, and then I came to the Carolina Panthers as a team photographer. So yeah.
Hello. I love sports, so I'm a big Laker fan, so shout out to all the Laker fans in the building. But yeah, I'm Sheldon. I am a partner manager for Twitter Sports. Been at Twitter for almost 3 years. Essentially, what my day-to-day really just consists of is helping our partners put dope content on the platform. I'm also a Blackbird social chair. Blackbirds is just our employee resource group here at Twitter. But yeah, I'm excited for the conversation today. Got a dope panel. But yeah, I'll kick it off to the next speaker.
Hey team, Jerron Irby, social media manager at ESPN. Majority of my focus is on marketing priorities, as well as now leading sports betting in fantasy as we dip into the betting lane. My day-to-day is pretty much focused on making sure that company priorities, whether it's Emmy award-winning The Last Dance or ESPN brand campaign, There's No Place Like Sports, or the NBA Finals or Stanley Cup playoffs, making sure that those company priorities are promoted on social media, but in a dynamic way. So a quick example that I usually give people is I tell older individuals, we can't put the 30-second commercial on TikTok. It's not going to perform well. Have to find more dynamic ways to actually promote those things across social channels.
Awesome. Let's give it up for them. So before we get into the questions, I want you guys to tell me, what's on your mind right now?
I can't lie, I'm really hungry. So I can't wait to eat.
It's really hot in Las Vegas. So I'm just trying to stay cool. But yeah, I'm just happy to be in attendance. There's a lot of dope people in the room. Happy to be involved with creators of color. But as far as what's on my mind, really just trying to just pay it forward.
Yeah, I'll just echo that real quick. Excited to be here. I feel like it was not very long ago. I was exactly in a lot of people's shoes over there in terms of listening to speakers and trying to figure out like my path and work my way up. So I do not do this very often, but I am excited to be able to give back, hopefully provide insight whenever I can. So excited to be here.
I love that. I love that.
I was going to say Donovan Mitchell's on my mind, because if he could be a Knick, that could be really exciting, since I was cheering for the Nets last year, and you saw how that worked out. So I'm like, okay, maybe I could go to the Knicks.
And what's on my mind is more women filling up first roles. That's what's on my mind.
Period. Okay.
So let's get started, guys. I think each of you have such a unique opportunity at amplifying and creating content for athletes, in super extremely different ways. So I'd like to know, from your experience and within your role, working with creatives, how do you build authentic relationships to tell diverse stories, and how do you earn an athlete's trust? And I'll get started with Chanelle. As a photographer, how do you do that? I know probably some of the issues that you probably go through is lighting athletes of color, and so I want to know, what's that like for you?
Well, I think my biggest thing when I first started out my career as being an athlete, skin color was my biggest issue. I felt like any photo or graphic they made of me never actually matched my skin color. So that was the first thing that I kind of started the conversation with players, is just what is making sure when I am creating graphics or taking photos, is this your true skin color? Am I making you too dark? Am I making you too light? Things like that. But when it comes to just building relationships, honestly, have conversations. Like I said earlier, I generally can't talk to you about football. There's nothing I'll say great game, and I don't even know if you actually had a great game. But I'm honestly talking to you about life, your family, things like that. Just what they're into, and just being an actual content creator. A lot of athletes are actually really into art and music and creative, and they don't even know that you can make a career out of that. So they're also intriguing with my job, and the fact to see a black woman, which you don't normally see on the football side, it's just another interesting conversation starter. So honestly, just talk to them just on a regular basis about everything outside of the sport, because that's honestly what most people talk to them about. And then being intentional and just saying that you're not using them for a photo shoot. I don't just talk to them when I need to do a photo shoot for them. I'm talking to them on a consistent basis outside of work. So
I love that. So I think not fully getting football actually works in your favor, because you're able to have authentic conversations that just focuses on them and other parts of themselves that don't get enough light. So
Yeah, we talk about the 23-12 effect a lot at the NBPA. So, the league has the 48 minutes on the floor. We have the other 23-12 minutes in their life. So we want to talk to them about their passions, their interests, what's next, what's exciting. And those are the stories that I want to tell. There are plenty of people, ESPN and other folks, who tell the story of the game unbelievably well. That's not our job. Our job is to really engage them in the stories of how they're building their lives. And I think when we sort of get to that space, as you said, it's a different kind of conversation to be able to have. And it's a far more interesting one. You talk about art. You talk about business, what businesses they invest in. We just had an Investor Day session here a couple of days ago for players. And they're investing in everything from dental apps to, sneaker, the sneaker businesses you would expect, but food delivery, all sorts of other things as well.
I love that. So Sheldon, what does that look like for you at Twitter?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we really just want to show up for athletes. Make sure we're interacting with them very early on in their career. It's very easy to kind of attach yourself when an athlete's popping or they're hot, but if we can get in the door early and build an authentic relationship with them, that's going to be beneficial for all parties in the long run. So it's something you'll see us continue to do. We're not perfect, but it's really just about building those relationships, making sure they feel comfortable on the platform, and we're showing up for them in full capacity.
Anything you want to add?
No, for sure. I'll add to it. I started my career in public relations, and prior to my time at ESPN, I worked at Wasserman, which is a pretty well-known sports agency, specifically in their NFL division. So kind of my start was focused on athlete brand building and trying to figure out opportunities to paint various athletes in a positive light. So I still take that into my work over at ESPN in terms of either long-form storytelling or just trying to make sure that the athlete's point of view is likely represented in any type of piece that we put out about them. So not just taking it from like a fan perspective or the audience perspective, but as we are telling this story or as we are putting out a piece of content, would it actually resonate with the athlete? And then obviously it's great when we, 30 minutes later we see that LeBron James or insert other athlete, Shohei Ohtani or Sha'Carri Richards actually post what we tell about them onto their IG story, or they quote tweet our content in a positive fashion. So, we always have room for improvement. We're not A+ all the time, but trying to make sure that I'm taking that into work day to day is definitely something that helps our process.
I love that. It sounds like some sports psychology going on in there.
I'll take it. My mom's a psychologist. I don't know. I just think, but the brain, I guess, the sociology standpoint, and trying to make sure that you're being thoughtful about who you're representing, as well as being thoughtful about the audience and their interests. They kind of go hand in hand.
Awesome. So that leads me to my next question. When I hear you say making sure that the athlete's POV is taken into account, that it resonates with them, this question's for everyone, by the way. Has there been a moment in your career where you had a concept or an idea and you were told no? Or a moment where you said, no, we can't do this. This does not resonate. This isn't okay. Explain to me what was that moment like, and what were some of those lessons that you learned and you took away from that?
I think I've had a few experiences just working in college football where you're just like, what the hell, no. But I think one situation I can talk about was, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a content piece. I think it was just like the timing of the piece. It was right around the George Floyd situation, and after it happened, we had a team meeting. It was never discussed in the team meeting, but then our coach wanted to put out a statement, and I was like, and obviously I had to design it, and I was like, why are we putting out a statement before you address the team? Like, personally, I don't give a shit about our fans. Like, it's about our players first, especially when the majority of the team are black players. And so I actually, instead of making a graphic, I actually called the head coach and was like, I'm sorry, I'm not making this till we actually have the discussion with the team. And we actually didn't. And then the next week we actually watched a movie as a team, American Skin, and then actually had the conversation about what's going on in America. And it was one of those situations where obviously the coach was a white man and I was literally the only black female on the entire football staff. So it was an awkward situation, but I just felt like it was more important to address the team before making a graphic when you didn't even know what would actually happen. So I just feel like let's not cap for social media and actually handle it internally before we put on performance externally.
Yeah, shout out to you for that leadership. Let's give a round of applause for that.
I plus one to that, like, George Floyd situation, a lot of companies just started capping. Big capping. And I think at the end of the day, for me, you just really want to make sure when a brand approaches you, you're being authentic. Anytime it doesn't feel genuine, I'm quick to say no. And I kind of like the question, and I want to flip it and really just put a perspective on black athletes, black creators, and I almost feel like there's this mindset that you feel like you have to say yes to opportunities because we've been so under-prioritized for years and years and years. But the reality is, it's okay to walk away. If you know you're being underpaid, like the racial pay gap is a real thing. It's
I don't want to get into it because it's a real thing for women, especially Latinx women. So.
Yeah, like know your worth, charge tax, add a service fee, like really just be.
All the apps have like 5 additional fees. You need to take that approach, actually.
Yeah, no, so I really just want to empower people to say no. It's okay, you'll find the right opportunity, and yeah.
Yeah, so building on finding the right opportunity, the last panel, she shouted out Michelle Roberts, who recently retired as the executive director of the NBPA. And I guess this is probably worth, I can say it now, she's not around anymore. But she talked about how she wanted the NBPA to be Wakanda. And she wanted there to be a lot of black people who worked there. And that's one of the reasons why I went to go work there. I wanted to be in an environment where I saw a black woman leader, where I saw a lot of black people working there in all professional capacities, where we could hire. There wasn't a question about like, gee, are they the most qualified when you're trying to hire a black person? It was like, yep, great, bring them on in. So, and now the union's run by Tamika Tremaglio, who's another woman of color, and seeing those traditions continue and that environment continue to thrive in that way. So for me, it's about yes, being in the situations where, and I'm so much older than all y'all, I can't even talk about it, but I've worked for so many stupid people over my career, and I'm able to make a choice to say, like, I'm not gonna, my value is different, my experience is different, and I'm gonna take it someplace where it will be recognized, because I'm not gonna fight you every day to bring my best, which is what I do.
I love that. Pick and choose your battles.
Yeah, I'll spin the question a little bit. We have a lot of brainstorms at ESPN, obviously, a lot of events, a lot of different things to cover. I'm actually typically like the no guy. I am very critical, strive for creative excellence. So I'm very often the no guy, but our social team, we have a yes and mentality to where an idea gets brought up and maybe right away in those first 30 seconds, whatever the pitch was, is an A+, but you just try to figure out a way to build off that. So it's yes, and then how can we take it further? It's not, no, your idea isn't good and we should just pivot to something else, but yes, you're possibly onto something. Let's figure out the right path. So I think that yes and mentality is very useful. And then another thing that I learned, I did not start my career with, but just providing context. Like I got to a point where I feel pretty confident in understanding like what will work well, what won't work well for the audience, what will perform well, what won't. So in terms of giving feedback, I'd be pretty short and sweet because there's so much on my plate. It's like, oh, quick Slack note, no, maybe we won't do that. I'll follow up later with a better idea. And then you leave that team kind of hanging of not knowing the why. So instead of just having a general yes or a general no, if you can provide context of reasoning why, that team will be better long term instead of you just having an understanding of, I know why the no is there, but providing that context, then they can take that into consideration day to day moving forward. So I think that's just a useful tool that I did not used to do, but now I am very, provide all context so the team has it.
And then I'm pretty sure it supports your team in learning and growing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so my next question is, now that we're on the professional development and team topic, outside of PR stunts, we've seen, all sports companies do these big, fancy PR stunts about diversity, but the front office and the back office still look the same. So my question for you guys is, how can organizations really push and develop their diverse talent for leadership roles? Like, what is missing? What did you not see done before, and what can we do now?
I hear that question, and I immediately think about Morgan Cato, where she obviously is now the first black assistant general manager for the Phoenix Suns, right? So for me, I'll always hear this concept about making sure we have a seat at the table, but the whole time we're in the wrong room. So we really need to make sure we're in the right room, and the right room is the room that's making the decisions, right? The room that is empowering people to be put in those positions where we can make change. So for me, it really just comes down to holding people accountable, and it's not just on us, it's also on our allies. Our allies have to be just as vocal.
Who are they? Give us more context on these allies.
The allies that show up for us in rooms we're not in, the allies that show up for us in rooms that we are in. It's very easy to support in silence, but when you can support out loud, it's just that much more impactful. So for me, I think it's a collective group effort where we could have more Morgan Catos, we could have more headlines like that across the sports industries. Yeah, we know there are certain leagues doing better than others. I don't want to call anyone out, but I think the NBA has, half of their head coaches are black, right? Or around that number. So we just have to hold people accountable at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say I focus a lot lately on language, and the things that I've heard even here for the past couple of days about diversity hire. I hear diversity hire and I want to punch somebody out, because I don't want to be a diversity hire. And I don't know anybody here who wants to be a diversity hire. I want to be hired because I'm the best person for this job. And even when you become the assistant general manager, if that language is still in your organization, then your competence is always in question. So I think we need to push our allies to change how we talk about this, because this is not about the right thing to do. Whatever, I don't even know what that means. Eating vegetables is the right thing to do, and I don't do that enough. So we know what the right, exercise, et cetera. So I really think it's about how do we talk about this internally? How do we make sure that our workplaces reflect the audiences that we serve? Like you have to, the fan, that is what we're here for. How do we make sure that people feel welcome when they walk into a space? And I do think that the NBA has done a better job than other leagues, potentially.
Like the hockey league? Yeah.
Well, no, hockey's got a black woman CMO. Hockey's trying to really show up.
CMO, they have, some teams have black social media managers.
They have a black GM, didn't they? Didn't some teams just hire a black GM woman? Yeah, so I mean, they are okay. So those moves, representation matters. We hear that a lot as well. I think that those are important things, but I really think in our organizations we have to really be maniacal about the language we use to talk about the people that are in our workforce.
Yeah, I see it because I'm talking about more from just a content side when you're looking at designers and people who are in charge of just the content side of things. And I just noticed that honestly at the younger generation when you're in college, there's a really big gap of the lack of minorities because they're not able to afford to go to these big schools with these big media programs. So when you look at who's coming through the industry from those bigger schools, it's white people. So you can't necessarily hire more minorities if they're not even exposed to or have access to the resources to get the same experience that their white counterparts get. So I feel like that's where a lot of NFL teams specifically, since I work in the NFL, creating whether it's job shadowing, more internships for minorities to give them access to the resources that a lot of students that can't afford to go to those big schools. And I feel like that, to me, I just noticed it even through social media. The students that reach out to me from HBCUs, they honestly have no idea about my job or even how to network through social, is because they don't have, a lot of them don't have football teams, they don't have media programs. So how can you make a diverse selection or to hire someone in these roles when they don't even know these roles exist or have the access to these type of environments? And I feel like that's where the gap is. So a lot of people say you need to start top down, but it's you have to start from these high school students and these college students that come from these underrepresented areas who just don't have resources to afford these cameras. I only went to Elon because I was on a volleyball scholarship. I would have been at community college too. And so we need to tap into those communities and those HBCUs that just don't have the resources that Texas and Ohio States and South Carolinas have.
I love that. Let's clap it up for that. But I did want to say, Chanelle, Christina mentioned language. The word minority is something that I've struggled with for most of my life because we actually are the majority. But the word minority is what got me my scholarship for Syracuse University. So I've dealt with this idea on how the word minority gets me some benefits, but then the word majority empowers me. I just wanted to address that little thing.
Well, minority, the word minority it's more frustrating because
so frustrating.
It's frustrating because especially because people look at just when they think of women, it's a lot of time when they say minorities, it's I have white women. It's that's not that doesn't count. No offense. So that's just a whole nother conversation, but yeah.
Well, that's why language matters, how what we say matters.
Exactly.
It's programming. Language is programming. I've removed that word from most of my vocabulary because it does not empower me. And we are a majority. So I lead with that, and again, I understand that all these language that's been created. It's been created to program us, and I'm happy that we have people like ourselves that are continuing to push the envelope and creating our own lanes and our own paths, regardless of the programming that we've endured.
Should I add on to the last question? No. Everyone's looking at me. I thought we
No
were
pressure.
Nah, I got it. Yeah, so two things come to mind for me. One from a what should execs and leaders be doing? And then the other is like, what could we possibly be doing better? I'll start with the first. I'm a big advocate of continued education. So, for big reason I am where I am today is from just peeping game, looking at what other people are doing and learning from that. And you can learn both from a positive standpoint as well as a negative standpoint. You see how other people communicate from a leadership standpoint. It's like, oh, if I'm a manager, I'd never talk like that. Or you see how other people send notes and emails that you're CC'd on. It's like, oh, that's super long. I'd probably condense it, these other bullet points. This guy's in this position. I'm learning from the cons. I'm learning from the pros. I think that entry-level people are held to like a standard of like, you need to continue to learn. You need to continue to get better and improve if you want to step up. But I think execs get to a point where there's a bit of laziness and they're not as interested and willing to learn about new audiences and other approaches that the company could be doing that would actually be beneficial for the org. So I think from a leadership standpoint, there just needs to be a little bit more of a thirst for learning that I don't think is there, that would obviously make organizations and brands better, and that's part of it. And then I think on our side, I think we have to not be fearful if we are the only person in the room.
Say that again.
I have like the highest confidence, like I think we have to not be fearful if we are the only or a small percentage of the people in the room. So I'm somebody who definitely wants to advocate for other minorities and make sure that there are opportunities for more on my team across, other competitors, whoever, trying to provide opportunities. But if I walk in the room and there's Jerron and there's Dave and Bob and, Max, it's like, this is crazy. I actually have a black manager whose name is Max. Shout out Max Kelly. But I thrive in those environments. I grew up in the Bay Area. I went to college in Nebraska. I've worked in DC. I've worked, all over the place. So if I'm the only one in the room, I wow in those environments. I think a lot of us are like, oh, I don't know if I want to work there. I'm the only person, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, I got a lot that they don't have, I bet. And I'm going to show them, and it'll be even easier, in my opinion, for me to prove my worth because I am different from other thought processes that are in the room. So don't be scared of it. Lean into it.
Jerron, did you play any college sports or high school sports?
Yeah, I played football at Wayne State Division II school in Nebraska. And then I just got my master's from Georgetown, Light Flex. I did not play sports at Georgetown, but that's where I went to school.
So one thing I do know, so I didn't play sports. I was a cheerleader in high school, and that was my sport, right? But I was always, obviously, with all the athletes. I spent a lot of time traveling with athletes. And I realize now, as an adult, how much sports builds resiliency in people, confidence in people, the ability to, be a quick decision maker, positive thinking. So I think the kids, Chanelle mentioned earlier about underserved communities, our kids in underserved communities who don't have access to sport are a little limited in their ability to reach high levels of confidence super young, right? So I think what happens is, because I've been intimidated before being the only woman that looks like this in a room full of white men and women, and it's taken time for me to feel confident, even being around athletes, but I see a lot of other people who are really intimidated, and I wonder, damn, if they played anything, would that have shifted something for them?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're working on a lot of original content focused on kids and families for just that reason. I was not an athlete either. I'm an amazing spectator. And, you know, but the values of sports, like when I started thinking about what kind of content can I make with players? A lot of our players either are kids or have kids, right? So they relate to all of this kind of content. And, you know, the thought that we've got a partnership with an independent production company out of Canada called 9 Story. They just did a show called Karma's World, which is, they partnered with Ludacris to do it. It's on Netflix. And, you know, the thought that we could make content that's aimed at young kids, that's focused on resilience, perseverance, dedication, teamwork, hard work, those are all the values of sports. And if we can deliver that in a way that shows that kids that look like them, players that look like them, we can involve players as voices and animation. Now we can really start to, I think, have an impact and change the perception of like what I can do, what I can be, what happens when I walk into a room. So I think that there's ways through actual sports, of course, that do that, but I think there's ways through media and entertainment, and that's where we can tap into the creators to really change that perception.
I was going to say, I completely agree. The reality is not everyone's going to make it to the league. I would like to think if I was a little bit taller, I'd be in the league, but it just didn't work out.
I wish I was a little bit taller.
Right. But yeah, it's very important to show kids the different opportunities that exist, right? That's why I love the work we're doing with creators of color, where it's really amplifying diverse creators, telling their stories, telling their background, really highlighting the important work they're doing for these companies in these communities. So for us, it's, again, paying it forward so kids can see, okay, what does a career as a producer look like? Someone who's a photographer behind the scenes. And that's something that I really feel strongly about.
Real quick, you said if you were taller, you'd be league bound. Who's your pro comparison? Who's your game like?
Ooh, maybe like Dwayne Wade.
You're lying.
You're right.
Okay, so since we're talking about kids, I want to talk about NILs. You know, the NIL deals. Oh, actually, this is Christina. I feel like you'll be the perfect person to answer this.
I don't know about no NIL.
You work with all the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, NILs have changed the game. They've created new opportunities for wealth, education, more awareness for these young athletes. Have you guys seen a benefit for both female and male athletes thus far, as we've seen this new wave of, you know, the wave of NIL, this NIL era?
I'm sure there will be benefits, but there's also going to be so much heartbreak and risk. And Donovan Mitchell partnered with the NBPA and the NBA to actually do a series, which is on social, about what it means. You know, what are the pitfalls? What are the mistakes not to make? I mean, you know, there's just as much exploitation that's going to happen for young kids in this new world as there is, you know, when they become professional, et cetera. Yep, everyone's heard of the kids who are making millions of dollars, pulling down a lot of money, but there are going to be a lot of other people who that isn't their experience. So I think making sure that they have as much access to as much information as possible to make really good decisions is what's hugely important.
Do you want to add anything?
I mean, I'd echo the, like, make meaningful, like, thoughtful decisions. I think that, you know, you see it somewhat frequently now. It's like, oh, yeah, I got 50 NIL deals. And, you know, most of them, you're not, like, making much. It's just, like, product seeding. Is that actually, like, useful for you and your brand long term? So I agree there. I'm also, I don't know, I'm very pro NIL, honestly. I think providing more opportunity for athletes, especially from a revenue standpoint, is awesome. But there's benefits for the leagues, the conferences as well. You know, players can bring in new endorsement deals that then create more sponsorship opportunities. You build relationships with companies that you didn't actually have any relationship with, you know, let's say 5 years ago. I think about Shop Gold is one that stands out to me, a jewelry company that has a lot of different partnerships with some well-known athletes. I also think that it's not just the stars who are receiving, like, praise. I think about Sedona Prince from Oregon and what she's done, as well as there's some twins, their names slip in my mind, on the women's basketball side, who are thriving, and they're at like a small D1 AA. So I think the opportunity is out there. Over the long term, I'll end on this, I think from a college standpoint, the programs that can get behind a either influencer marketing / athlete brand building strategy the quickest and find the most effective ones, those are the ones who will be champions in years to come, because that's where I want to go. I can potentially make X amount and build a brand over the next 3 years, as opposed to going to a Power 5 who's well known, but they have no true marketing strategy for me. I want to go to the person who's going to impact me once my time off the field is up as well. And I think more stars are going to start going to programs like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, I did just want to shout out the work we're doing. Shout out David Herman. He's leading those efforts with Open Doors, where literally we're taking brands and we're aligning them with student athletes from a content perspective. So I'm very bullish on the NIL just future, the outlook. Are there challenges? Are there concerns from a branding standpoint? Of course, but I don't think that's going to stop the momentum. And if it does, we could just edit this out.
How do we see content, how do we see storytelling, now with these NILs? How do we see that playing out for creators of color? Or I can rephrase that. How do you see content creators telling stories around these athletes? So what are some of those big opportunities that you see coming?
I'll start. We're definitely trying to continue to innovate, launch new brands. Quick flex, real quick, if I have time. Omar Raja and a team that mainly leads our SportsCenter Instagram as well as ESPN TikTok has evolved our TikTok account to a top 5 most followed brand on the platform. Not the top 5 most followed sports brand, but a top 5 most followed brand, period, which I think is kind of exceptional. So shout out Omar Raja and team. But we've also started to launch additional brand accounts on the platform, such as ESPN MMA, ESPNW, which is our women's focused brand. And we also have SportsCenter Next, where we focus on up-and-coming youth and try to make sure that we are identifying them and telling stories about them, somewhat similar to an overtime model. So we are hyper-focused on trying to find youth, ahead of time, make sure that we are telling these stories in a meaningful way, produce content with them, gain relationships with them ahead of time. So 5, 10 years from now, when they are elite in high school, in college, the relationships built, and maybe we can, pull out 30 for 30 for Mikey Williams and more original content for these individuals.
I think it's interesting when I look at the storytelling just in general, because I would love to see just more people of color telling athletes their stories, because I've just noticed when you look at the NFL draft, it's like this dramatic sob story every time they get to a black athlete. It's like his mom was on drugs and in jail for 25 years. And then we get to Billy Joe, it's like his dad was a CEO of a marketing company. It's like, what? And it's like,
Shout out Billy Joe.
So I just feel like when you have more people like us telling these players' stories, you're not gonna hear the sob stories. I just feel like we're more focused on the black boy joy and the black girl joys more than just no offense to our white counterparts. I feel like they're quick to focus on the negative, and not every black athlete that's a professional athlete has gone through the struggle. I'll honestly have more positive upbringings, but that's literally all they focus on. So I would just love to see that shift in just the storytelling as a whole of, I don't want to hear a sob story. And if they had a traumatic experience, they probably don't want it on national television. So let's focus on something bigger and better than what they went through.
Christina, did you have anything you wanted to add on?
No, I agree with everything that's been said. I think what's great is that this generation of people who are benefiting from this, they're used to telling their own stories on social. So I think it'll be interesting to see how, to take the lead from them in many ways about how do these platforms get used best? What is the best way to tell the story? What is the best way to engage an audience? Brands are desperate. That's why they're coming to young people, right? Because they're you must know something that I don't know. So, I think that's hopefully they'll let that be the front and not necessarily always try and impose no, this is the only way we can represent our brand.
Yeah, I think it's the cool thing right now to kind of hop onto this diverse creator wave.
Yeah.
You see a lot of these companies coming out with these accelerator programs, handing out bags of money to content creators, and that's great. Like, we want that, but the real test is 5 years from now, right? Where we want to make sure these companies, these brands are keeping that same energy when it's not so cool, when the hype has died down, and you're still supporting Black content creators, because that is a critical element in terms of helping those stories get out there, is making sure they're supported. So.
Yeah. So what kind of programs, on that note, what kind of programs are needed to develop diverse talent, and you guys know what I mean by diverse, obviously, on and off camera, like developing Black talent on and off camera? What's missing? I've been on so many sets, right, where you look around on the set and you're lucky if there's two people that look like me, on set. So what do you think could help shift some of that?
Hire Black people. It's not that hard. If I'm shooting something with players, I don't want them looking out at an audience or like a sea of camera people, crew people that don't look like them.
But I think we have to hire diverse. So I think we need diverse partners, right? So
and we also need to hold our partners accountable. If you're going to come and shoot with me, if I'm going to hire you, then we got to talk about what this crew looks like. I'm putting a lot of money in people's pockets.
We got to get Beyonce on them.
Well, I mean, we all got to be Beyonce. It's important. It's important. When we did our documentary, we had 2 directors, 1 Black, 1 white. We had Black editor. We had Black people working on this thing. That is important. And if you're in a position of hiring, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, we had our production day a couple weeks ago, and it was a production of probably 25 people, and the only women and Black women were on my set, and there was 3 Black women and I had a white woman. I was the only people, and they looked around, they were like, wow, there was literally no other women besides on my set, or even just a Black person was literally on my set. And so the 2 things that I've started with the Panthers is, for one, it's just a job shadowing externship where they can just get experience on seeing what job opportunities there are, and it's only for minorities. And I went through all of Charlotte and Rock Hill and found every HBCU, every community college, and found a direct contact, and I emailed the link directly to them. It's not public, it goes right to them. And I also reach out to just young, diverse creatives that DM me on Instagram saying, hey, we have a shoot coming up, would you be interested in shadowing? Do you want to shoot it? We'll obviously pay you. And then another thing we're working with is a minority creatives workshop, where it's just 25 creatives, you apply for it, and it's, instead of a full application, it's just a 1-minute video. I'm not the best at writing, and I feel like you can tell my passion when I'm speaking, so I want to give them that opportunity to just apply with a video, explaining why they should be selected for the program. It's just an 8-hour workshop. We're providing all the camera gear, partnering with Thomas Davis because he's into photography, and it's just a free event for 25 creators. They don't have to worry about a laptop. We're covering laptops, everything, just to give them access to kind of bridge that gap for creators that don't have access to the gears and the laptops, and it's only for minorities. It gives, I think that's the only way to fix the industry, is bridging that gap for people that don't have resources. So that's what we've been doing with the Panthers, to create opportunity for more minorities to fill these roles that we do have.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of I don't know who to hire. Yeah. I don't know anybody. It's okay, that's really not that hard to find people, and
I've heard that too.
Yeah, and to make sure that that's, important. Once the people who work for us know that that's a value that we have, and we've tried to do this, in the wake of George Floyd, we started to have this conversation internally about everybody that we hire. How do we look at this all throughout the organization and not just in one area? So, and it's a process, but you got to start someplace.
Okay, so going to my next question, I want to talk about personal branding, and what are some ways we've all, I think everyone here has been in the industry for a long time. So what are some ways that you early on utilize digital content or content period to build your personal brand, and what do you advise creators now to be mindful of as they build their personal brands while working for a sports organization?
I think that's
I think the biggest thing, well, first of all, anyone that follows me on Twitter, I feel like I'm very transparent about what my brand is. And I feel like that's how I was able to move up in the industry, because I wasn't like a flip-flopper. I feel like when you're genuine about your brand, it's easy to make genuine content. And I feel like that's why in the industry, you get kind of like those one-hitter quitters when they're able to make one piece of content and then they can't replicate it because that's not their brand. So I think it's important. So we've talked about it in other sessions about learning your language and knowing what your brand is from the start. So then you're able to either create content or find places that actually fit your brand, because like you can't fit a square in a round hole. And so I just think it's important to just build your brand, and also finding a company that supports your vision, because then it's really easy and fluid to make content.
Sharon? I'm sorry, Sheldon? Sorry. I'm like, I think I mixed you. I combined both of y'all names. It's hysterical.
You're good. At the end of the day, I think as a creator, you have an opportunity to really leverage your power. What I mean by that is a lot of these brands are looking to tap into the culture. And the beautiful thing about the word I just said is the culture starts with us. Like, we're the leaders, we're the shapeshifters, the needle movers. We really impact the way the culture looks and how it feels. So as a content creator, you definitely just want to consider leveraging that when you're having these conversations with these brands at the end of the day.
Okay, so I think we're at time. I want to thank #Sports and the entire team for facilitating this conference and this great conversation. I want to thank you all for your time, and hopefully the audience has gained so much insight. I know I gained a lot from just having this conversation, and let the audience know where we can find you, where we can keep in touch with you guys.
We can go down. Yeah, happy to chat after this. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, at my bland which is just my name, Jaron_Irby. Super simple.
At Twitter, at Sheldon C. Lewis.
I think all my social medias are Nels, N-E-L-E-Z, either _ before or after, but I'll be out there drinking, so find me later. It's okay.
Well, let's give it up, guys.
Thank you.